I'm Beverly, and I'm on the witness stand.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to part 2 of the Dismembered Wife Trial. I'm Beverly from the witness stand, and I'm so glad to have you back. I did tease this a little bit in the last video, and we're going to get right into it. Today, we're going to talk about the day 3 of testimony where they bring in Mindy's parents. The first up was Mindy's mother, talking a little bit about Mindy, but I just think that she could have, we could have gotten so much more. I think the state left a lot of holes without explanation. Mindy's mom testified about she and her husband living with Mindy and Nicholas and the things that Nicholas told them. I don't know how to describe Mindy's parents. I don't see how people of such intelligence could be this naive. So they believed Nicholas with the whole Microsoft app and the Jim McIntyre thing. They believed him. The Jim McIntyre thing is so bizarre, just so bizarre. Any reasonable person, or maybe less than reasonable person, would see this as a farce, but they believed him. They said they loved him, and they said they believed him and whatever he told them. They both said, Nicholas, I should say that Mindy's father's name was Frank. Remember Frank the Fourth? And I guess he is Frank the Third. Betsy and Frank Mevin. Nicholas told both of them that he was working on this program software, whatever the case may be, and that he would get paid a lot of money on the back end. He had them convinced that he did work for them, and somehow or another he'd gotten himself in a mess, and the FBI was supposedly taking care of him through this. I don't think it was a security firm. I think it was security within the FBI. No one thought to ever check this story. But I guess maybe her parents would have said, what would the FBI have told him? It's a matter of security, so they wouldn't have told him anything. Okay, so he gave him this big story about what was going on in the family. But here's where it gets sticky. At some point, Nicholas and Mindy moved out away from Mindy's parents. Okay, so they were living in Savannah at that time. And it's my understanding that Mindy's parents were living still in Hilton Head. But they were told that Mindy was sick and that she was going to the hospital and that it wasn't anything significant. How do I put this in a continuous thought, you guys? He said he was taking her to the hospital, but he didn't tell them the name of the hospital. And quite frankly, I don't even know I don't think they asked, because I think Betsy Mevin said, we assumed it was a military hospital. Well, why? Your husband doesn't work for the military anymore. And Nicholas told Mindy's parents that she was sick and that he was taking her to the hospital, but he would not tell them what the name of the hospital. But they didn't ask either. But I thought, well, maybe they could have gotten that one over. But you're not going to have my daughter in a hospital and my son-in-law not tell me what the name of that hospital is. So they didn't know that. They didn't know where. They didn't know the doctor's name. None of that. They were told that Nicholas was going to pick her up this one afternoon. He was supposed to be going back to pick her up, and she was coming home because she was well enough to come home and everything was looking good. So their story is that he told them he was going to the hospital to pick her up, but when he got there, they pulled him to the side and they told him something had happened, some heart thing had happened, and she had died. They didn't call him to tell him that. The only phone call that he had that morning was for them to say that she was ready to go home. So he gets there, and then he finds out that she's died. The police asked, did you ask what happened? No. Did you ask to see her? No. And at one point he said he saw a body covered up in a room. He assumed it was Mindy, but he never looked. He said they gave him lots of paperwork that he had to sign, but he didn't keep any of it. He didn't know where her remains had been sent to, but all of a sudden, the next day it was cremated. But he doesn't know anything about how that all went down. He doesn't know the funeral home. He doesn't know any of the arrangements. There was no funeral. There was no understanding of why there was no funeral. There was no understanding about anything. Where were Mindy's ashes? Well, he said in an interview that they were in a thick plastic bag inside a pretty little velvet bag. And I think he said that he got her an urn, but he couldn't describe it. And then he said that he no longer had her ashes, that he had gone to someplace, Virginia, someplace, I don't know where, and spread them where she was really happy at. I don't know if it was a park or whatever, but he had spread them. Do you have any paperwork of picking up the ashes from a funeral home? No. Do you know where the funeral home is? No. Do you know the name? No. Do you know the name of the hospital? Well, it's not a hospital like you would expect. It's a a different kind of hospital. To my knowledge, he hasn't even given the name. They asked him for the doctor's name. He can't remember, but he said that this doctor made house visits at least 20 times in the last month or so that she had been before she went into the hospital, but that it was not like a normal hospital. Well, what kind of hospital is it, Nicholas? He couldn't say. Are you getting my drift here? And here's the deal. Betsy, Mindy's mom, couldn't say either. They said, did you ask why there was no funeral? Well, no. Did you ask what had happened to her? No. Did you ask did you know that she wanted to be cremated? No. Did you ask where her body was? No. Well, did you ask why you couldn't see the body? Well, no. And the father pretty much said the same thing. Frank III, I'm assuming it's Frank III, his name was Frank, didn't ask any of these questions either. No, the state asked him, were you not concerned of where she was, and did you not want to see her? And he said, I would have liked to have said goodbye, but I wasn't worried where Mindy was. I wasn't worried about any of that because based on I think he said he was a pastor, but based on his faith, he knew where Mindy was, and he knew he'd see her again, and he wasn't worried about it. Well, I know where I'm going, and I know where my daughter's going. But that doesn't mean I don't want to know where she is right now, and that doesn't mean I don't want to know where she is in her supposed death. I want to go see her. And my son-in-law, God bless you, Jerry, but my son-in-law is not going to tell me this crap. Maybe I'm smarter. I don't know. But let me tell you about her parents. So I said I think he was a minister, pastor, or something. But let me tell you what else they were. The father was a financial advisor, and the mom was an office manager for a law firm. Nowhere was anything talked about as far as who paid bills. Did the mom and dad never pay any rent or anything? Did they live off Nicholas and Mindy and then lived off Frank IV for a while? How could that be? Okay, so they weren't. But were they paying rent? There was no explanation for this. God, what in the eyeballs off a frog? Why cannot anybody see? I said convoluted, I mean it again. What is wrong with these people? This is so bizarre. James Patterson could not write this. Stephen King could not write this and make it believable. I know they say truth is what is it? Truth is stronger than fiction? I don't know why that's going out of my head. Maybe that's part of me being a boomer too. But nevertheless, truth is stranger than fiction. But what is the truth? What is true here? There's not 1 ounce of truth in this entire story. Okay, an ounce. And that ounce includes that Nicholas and Mindy were together. I don't even know if there was a wedding at this point. Mindy's parents were Betsy and Frank Mebane, and Mindy's dead. That's the only thing that I can tell you in this entire... Okay, wait a minute. One more. He did it. There I go. I'm going ahead and I'm telling you what I think. He did it. Now, I would love to say that he is 1, going to rot in hell, 2, be convicted. But again, I'm going to go back to the last 2 trials we talked about, which was Diddy and then was the honor killing. I thought those were they had tied it up and put a bow on it. But what happened? Can this guy get away with this? I think when I'm through, just updating you, you're going to see that this guy is guilty. They didn't question anything. They questioned nothing. So I remember specifically the state asking the father about, didn't you want to know? And he said that about, no, he knew where she was. But they asked the mom, the state's attorney, the prosecutor, asked the mom, how do you feel now about it? And I remember her saying, naive. I think she said stupid. And I don't remember the other qualifiers that she used. But when she described how she felt, she never even broke up. She didn't really show any emotion. If that had been me, I would have been devastated to tell in open court, in the public, what I did and did not do. The shame of that. Now, for me, it would have been shame. Absolute shame. It makes me want to cry that parents could be. And I know that horrible things happen in the world that parents do to their kids, older kids and younger kids. I understand that. But it broke my heart a little bit because I have a daughter that, is close to Mindy's age or age when she died. And I cannot understand more questions and answers were not demanded. I don't understand it. They were asked, could they understand why there was no memorial service or anything like that? And they said no. And they never questioned him. Either of the parents questioned him when he talked about that security team and that they had to monitor them 24/7. But here's the thing. He could get out of the house. He wasn't afraid to get out of the house. He kept instilling fear in everybody else. But Mindy's parents went to work, while Mindy's mom went to work, while Mindy's dad went and lived, for a while helping the son out, the younger son. And Mindy's younger brother was there and Nicholas didn't say anything about, hey, we need to really be careful about Matthew. None of that. They just carried on with their life, never asking questions. I bet you have 1,000 questions right now that you'd like to ask, right? Well, you know what? I don't have an answer to a single one of them. I'm just reporting what was said, stating the fact. You're going to hear about interviews that were played in court. That's coming up. And there was more detail about the what about this, what about that. But suffice to say, there was no documentation anywhere of anything. Money, Jim McIntyre, FBI, security team, Microsoft. Where was Mindy? What was Mindy's health condition? What hospital was she in? What was the doctor? What did she die of? How was she cremated? And then all of a sudden her remains were found across 2 counties. How is Nicholas going to explain that? Well, I'll tell you how he's going to explain it. Jim McIntyre and his security team took her out of the hospital. And it's all a conspiracy with the doctor that nobody knew. And a hospital that wasn't a regular hospital. And Jim McIntyre had her killed. This whole thing. I think that's what he's going to say. I can't wait for that part. But I think we kind of got a lot of it in the 2 interviews he did with, police interrogations. But there's no public testimony or public documentation of any of the paperwork surrounding her death, anything in their life. None of that can be found anywhere. Then Nicholas made a comment, I can't remember if it was in the first or the second, maybe in both of the interviews, where he talked about buying her medication and he kept saying, check CVS. Well, either no one checked CVS or there was no documentation on that either, or it didn't happen. But for me, as an investigator, I would want to know documentation or lack thereof. If they've done that, it's not come out that I know of with any of the agents that were doing any of this investigation, whether they were Georgia state investigators or if they were FBI agents. Yeah, I just don't know. So no credible explanation for any of this. Nicholas's own claims are he can't explain the no paperwork. He can't explain her death versus her dismemberment. And he can't explain several other things having to do with his phone in the car. He just implied they were being followed and they had to constantly be on the move. They pulled up all kinds of prior statements, police interviews, depositions, even casual remarks, and I'm reading my notes, and have okay, wait a minute. They pulled up in court, the state would pull up documentation that they did have, like text messages and things like that. Maybe somebody that was conversing. I think that one of Mindy's friends, they had done screenshots from Signal. Anyway, there was some police interviews, there was some deposition, casual remarks, witnesses that said he said this or he did that. They would automatically try to contrast them, and it was selective storytelling. No, I feel like in playing chess, but having to describe it with Monopoly. That makes as much sense as any of this. It makes as much sense. Okay, day 4. We have DNA analysts and forensic experts. So there was a few things that were kind of interesting. We had 2 agents. Let me get their names. Okay, 2 agents that testified about DNA evidence linking Nicholas to various items found around Mindy's remains. I think that was some of the things that were in the tubs. I think it was some blood. I think it was fingerprints maybe. But fingerprints, I mean, obviously, they lived in the same house. So, but anyway, there were some correlations in there. So they did that. And then you have James, I love this, James Frost. He called himself Jack Frost. I thought that was really cool. No pun intended. He talked about suspicious purchases like the knives, shovels, cleaning supplies, all around the time of Mindy's death. Do you know, every time I go to the store and I buy cleaning supplies or I buy garden tools, I'm always thinking to myself, will this ever come up somewhere in my record? Will somebody link me to something because of this? Same thing while I'm doing this commentary and I go look up how this can be tied to a murder. What do you need to do this? Do you think it doesn't cross my mind saying, will somebody link me to something because of this? Will they believe me if it's because I'm just in trial? Like a trial commentator? Something to think about. And that goes for you guys too, about watching all of this stuff. My husband gets real upset. I might have said this before because he doesn't like me watching all this true crime because he thinks I'm setting it up. maybe to go after him. And see, that'll probably be used against me too. Okay, then they brought in Airbnb owner because if I'm not mistaken, the last place, I honestly don't know where this Airbnb comes in because I think it was in Hilton Head and I think it might have been, I just don't know. I think that one went right out of my head, but I think it had something to do with linking Nicholas to all of the temporary housing issues that he used, where he was moving around. I think that's where that came in, but it wasn't that significant. And I think that some a forensic biologist talked about DNA traces in temporary, which was part of the Airbnb, but it wasn't really heavily covered in the media. And it maybe added context to the timeline, but it didn't really say a whole lot. I don't think it really helped you with anything going on in this case. They probably would say that was not true. But this is where it gets interesting. And this is where I really wanted to talk about the GBI agency, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Tracy Sands. Yes. So he was the agent and alongside another agent, I think another agent was with him. They interviewed Nicholas the first time in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where he was living when they arrested him the day after they identified Mindy. I got to go back and tell you something. I forgot all about this, but this is pretty much where it came out in the trial. They brought in, are you ready for this? Nicholas's third wife, which apparently he started some communication stuff with, inappropriate, before Mindy died. They got married, and there's not a lot of information being told about that. Like, I was shocked. It was like days in before I found this out. But she testified, and she testified to all of these lies, same kind of mess. But she testified to the fact that he said Mindy had died from a heart attack, I think it was. And that was pretty much all she knew. And she just was, oh, that's so sad. That's kind of like, and that I really believe that's what she was really thinking at the time. The lies started again. She believed all of them. So is he a con man or is he just a fantastical liar? I think a bit of both. But I think that lying part, he's maybe, on a linear line with the devil sure went down to Georgia. Yep, I said it. Okay, she found out about all of this stuff when he got arrested for Mindy's death. That's when she found out about everything, and she immediately went to have her marriage annulled, which she got it. So I felt bad for her. I felt bad for all of the wives. The first one because she wasn't getting her money. The second one because she died. And the third one because thank God she survived. But would she have been the next one? I think so. I really think so. Okay. So that's where he was living with his third wife when he was arrested. So the GBI agent, Sands, and the other detective flew out to Lancaster where he was being held in a jail there to do the first interview before extraditing him back. So they went out and they interviewed him, and it started out very cordial. And I would say that the whole interview was very cordial. But what they were doing was setting the stage for the next one. So the first one was just asking him questions. Is everything okay? You need some water? You need a Coke? You need a Pepsi? Do you want some nabs? It was that kind of stuff. So it started out being really nice. And then they asked him, tell us. They'd ask him some questions and let him tell. They let him really drive the interview. And I think it was to set him up to catch him in lies. And that's exactly what they did. In that interview, can you believe this? But this is how you know you've got a master manipulator at work here. He thought he could best them, so he waived his Miranda rights. And he said, yeah, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you before talking to an attorney or without my attorney here. Yeah, no problem. So he did. I think I have this in 4 different videos. Oh my God. Editing. Okay. He kept saying over and over, I didn't harm her. I didn't harm her. Over and over with, every question or every comment, over and over. I didn't harm her. All right. Then after that's over, you get Lauren Satcher, who is a tool marks expert. I didn't even know they had such a thing, that they had one person dedicated to just tool marks. That's interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. Reminds me a little of Dexter. If you didn't see that, you got to watch that series. If you're true crime, you've got to watch that series. The other thing, I'm off on a tangent. I realize if you haven't seen it, I don't remember if it's on Netflix or if it's on Hulu. It's one of those. I think it's Netflix. I love Netflix because there's no commercials. Hulu, get it together. Get it together. Anyway, It's called Mr. and Mrs. Murder. It is a documentary that it's fascinating. So I watch, true crime documentaries all the time. So I may give you some recommendations when I'm on here and I've seen one that's really good. But that's a recent one. And my husband, I keep saying he just worries about me doing these videos because he thinks I'm plotting and planning. I'm not. I just am interested. But he watched it with me and he loved it. So I think it's one to watch. Okay, let's get back. She was a tool marks expert, and apparently there was a knife found near the torso. So it began to, and tools from a deer processing kit, similar to one that Nicholas purchased. I guess he figured, how do you make that kind of purchase and it not be found when your wife disappears? If you dropped her somewhere, which is what he did, I told you I think he's guilty. But when you dropped her there and you left those tools, did you not think that that could be tied back to you and Amazon or wherever you bought it? It's like the Coburger. Gosh, I was looking forward to doing that one. But it's just like the Coburger trial. Crime. He left that knife, not the knife, but the sheath, and then they found the knife, and his fingerprint was on the sheath. He bought it off Amazon. You don't buy stuff where they have cameras where you walk in. You have to do your due diligence. And you don't buy stuff like cleaning supplies. Use what you have. And if you don't have Clorox in your house, you need to go ahead and get it. There. If you watch true crime, you probably can use what you learn on there in the event. Not saying I would, not saying you would, but it's interesting. We learn, right? Okay, so she concluded that based on where she saw marks in the bones, I guess on the body too. But anyway, she came out and said she did not believe that was the same knife. She believed a power tool had been used on her based on the markings in the bones. And there were, I think she called them hesitation. So it's like you start, but you don't go all the way through and then you pull it back. I pray to God that she was gone. But she did have multiple fractures to her skull. And so we hope that it was quick. I know it couldn't have been painless, but it was quick. So that was her testimony. And then we had an FBI cell phone analyst, James Burney. He testified about cell tower data. That's the other thing, you idiots. Turn your phone off. Anyway, the phone pinged near a Home Depot in the morning and later in the area surrounding the hunting club. We all know that. Anyway, it did. It pinged, and the cell phone data placed Nicholas near the key locations. At some point, he did turn his phone off, and he did turn his cell phone out, and often that was used as testimony. Used against him as saying that he was trying to evade or intentional invasion. Okay. Then his phone went dark from approximately 10:30 p.m. through midnight. The perfect time to drop a body, right? Okay. Leading investigators to suspect he turned off the device to avoid tracking. So now here comes the defense. He is not from around here. I'm assuming that this is a lawyer that maybe Nicholas knew, but he should be doing tax law. He was not qualified. And yeah, he was not qualified. Okay, so the defense argued, and I'm going to have to look at notes for this, that Lauren Satcher testified that the knife found at the scene couldn't have been used in the dismemberment based on those, probably a power tool. And the defense did not argue the facts outright. He just pointed them out again. That's all he did. Then he focused on preserving context, requesting that certain crime scene photos be withheld from the jury to avoid undue emotional impact. This move suggests they aim to minimize the visual impact. Well, I would too. To look at that, you're going to have an opinion, right? So will the jury. Okay, phone data and a web of lies. He said that while the prosecution highlighted his omission of documentation and his turning off the phone during key moments, he did not directly confront these allegations in a head-on. You get up and the points that the prosecution made, the defense is supposed to go after those and try to sway the jury, at least to reasonable doubt, at least to that. He suggested that the broader focus should be on Jim McIntyre and the fact that Nicholas did all of this out of fear and trying to run away. There's so much of this that I just don't understand. Oh, he makes it very difficult. Okay, so let's go to the next subject. He kept saying that, okay, everybody, another technical difficulty, and it's taken me to today, which is Wednesday, the 13th. I'm going to finish up day 4 and day 5. Let me see. Yeah, day 4 and day 5, and then I will get back to day 6 and day 7 in another video, because I told you this one is long. There's a lot to it. And forgive me, because I am a boomer and I am a retired school teacher. I retired in the second semester of 21, and I tell you, I stopped teaching because I could tell that the kids were going into technology that I didn't understand. And when your kids are teaching you technology throughout your teaching, to save your dignity, you have to move. And I'm still trying to work through it, learning as I go. And I hope you will stay with me through this journey, because it will get better and better. It's better than the first one. So, yeah, just bear with me. I saw a cartoon one time about, it said, when you call your adult kids to come and help you fix your computer, and it was a picture of Jesus. And so, I told my daughter, her name is Shannon, and I call her Sheezus. So Sheezus had to help me all yesterday afternoon figure out how to do some of this stuff and to repair. Anyway, all that being said, we left off with Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Tracy Sands. He was in charge of the investigation, and he was amazing. He was thorough, and he came across really well on the stand. Quiet, calm, he didn't get rattled, nothing. So he was a very good witness. Had I been one of the jurors, I would have really been influenced by him. So he talked about specifics of the case, thinking, he was trying to put together the timeline and have it match to the evidence, and it wasn't matching. So when I think I talked about this, but if I didn't, let me reiterate. He went to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where Nicholas was being housed right after his arrest. And he and another detective went up there and questioned. Well, it was a real easy questioning, very personable, very calm, very quiet, and he let him just talk. They played that interview. The whole interview was 2 hours long. They played it in court. And I'm telling you that when I say that Nicholas's timeline and answers to simple questions made no sense. Now, let me just tell you, he had 2 law degrees. This was not somebody who was unreasonable unable to think. Yes, his law degree probably helped him in concocting his stories, but the problem is his story was ridiculous. A child, an elementary child could have said, that doesn't make sense. So anyway, so he conducted it, and Nicholas claimed in that first interview that Mindy died in a hospital after a stroke. So at first he was saying heart conditions, and then he said it was a stroke. Then another time he said a stroke related to heart. Get your story straight, Nicholas. Get your story straight. He said, he didn't know what the name of the hospital. It wasn't like a normal hospital, blah, blah, blah. And what was interesting was he waived his Miranda rights, and he said he would talk to them without an attorney. Well, he gave them fodder to put him in jail for the rest of his life. It was crazy, crazy. I don't know if this man just got it in his head. I wonder if he was like this as a child, but I don't know if a switch somewhere in his life caused him to be this way. I would seriously think one of two things. Some serious mental health, but he doesn't sound like it when he talks. The second thing is sociopath. That's where I'm going. Psychopath, sociopath. That is where I'm going. And the interview came across with him being so believable in that he was cordial, he was easygoing, he was personable. In that respect, you could go, oh, this is such a nice guy. It can't be all messed up. But it was. So then you think, when you logically look at it, you have to say, no, this doesn't make sense. Explain this. But that's not what they were doing on that first one. They were letting him talk and setting the scene for the second interview where he was confronted. But the first one was giving him rope, okay? Giving him rope. The interview demonstrated that he chose to talk without a lawyer, undercutting his possible claims of coercion. No, they didn't coerce him to do anything. And you can see it, and the jury can see it. And this, look, I fogged up my glasses. Undefeatable, is that right? Undefeatable, okay. He can't make it where it's convincing, okay? He's a smart man. I don't understand.
I'm Beverly, and I'm on the witness stand.